The afternoon sun poured through the window of my bedroom, illuminating the specks of dust that danced like whispers in the air. I sat on the hardwood floor, knees aching from 20 minutes of silence, gripping a brass key that felt heavier than it should. My name is Valerie Montez, and I'm 58 years old. 3 months ago, I buried my husband, Peter, after 23 years of what I believed was a beautiful, honest marriage. Today, I'm about to break the one promise he asked me never to break. The key, in my hand, no bigger than my thumb, had been taped beneath his jewelry box, hidden in the one place I never thought to look. It had lived just inches from where I rested my head each night, completely unaware. And now that key was burning against my palm like a confession. The drawer it belonged to sat quietly in front of me, a deep mahogany piece with an elegant brass lock that had once seemed ornamental, now ominous. "Valerie, promise me," Peter had said, the night he moved that antique desk into our room on our 5th anniversary. "This drawer, the bottom one, it's private. It's all business papers, legal stuff, things that will only worry and confuse you. Please don't open it." I had laughed, kissed his cheek, and said, "Why would I want to go through boring legal papers? I trust you, Peter." I said it so easily because back then, trust was effortless. Peter handled everything: our money, our retirement, the taxes, the investments. I was a high school literature teacher who came home to a perfectly managed life. Bills were always paid. Peter reassured me our future was stable. I felt lucky. I felt protected. And now, here I was, sitting on the same floor where I used to fold our laundry, with a key that screamed questions I wasn't ready to ask, but could no longer ignore. After Peter's heart attack, I quickly realized just how little I knew. Nothing made sense. Our accounts didn't match the numbers I'd always assumed we had. Credit cards surfaced, cards I'd never seen. I spent night after night going through files, bank statements, and insurance letters, and I still had no idea how much we had, or didn't. Yesterday, while preparing a donation box of Peter's belongings, I noticed the lining in his jewelry box was loose. I lifted it, expecting dust or a stray cufflink. Instead, there was the key, taped down with yellowing tape and a note, "For Valerie, when she's ready." When I'm ready? Ready for what? The words clawed at me for a full day. My sister Dana thinks I should ignore it, donate the desk, and let it all go. My daughter Kayla, calling from her home in Portland, urged me to honor Peter's memory and leave the drawer closed. He had his reasons, Mom. Maybe he just wanted to protect you. But protect me from what? Every part of me still clung to the memory of Peter as a man who loved me. And yet I couldn't shake the sense that whatever was inside that drawer wasn't just numbers and policies. It was the truth. I held the key like it was a live wire. My hands trembled, my breath caught in my throat, and part of me still felt like I was betraying Peter. But another part of me, the part that had been screaming in silence these past 3 months, knew I needed to open that drawer to find out who I had really been married to. Before I could tell you what was in that drawer, I needed to take you back. Because without knowing the life Peter and I built, the life I thought we had, you might never understand how deep the betrayal cut. You might not see why the truth shattered not just my trust in Peter, but the very way I saw myself. I met Peter in 2000, in the small cafe near the university library in Santa Fe. I was 34, recently out of a painful breakup, and tired of believing love was something I had only read about in books. Peter was 37, tall, confident, kind eyes, and a voice like comfort. He was in commercial real estate, successful, witty, and very sure of himself. He noticed me struggling with a stuck zipper on my bag And his opening line was, "That bag's fighting for its life. Need backup?" I laughed, genuinely, and we talked for hours. He asked questions. He listened. He said, "You've spent your life holding everything together for everyone else. Let someone take care of you for once." I hadn't realized how much I'd been craving those words. I had built a life on independence, paying my own bills, managing my own home, surviving without help. And here was someone offering me the chance to set it all down. Peter wooed me like the hero of every story I taught my students. Weekend aways, flowers delivered to my classroom, handwritten notes tucked inside my coat pocket. He proposed on the edge of the Grand Canyon with a diamond ring and the words, "Let me take care of you for the rest of our lives." After we married, Peter made good on that promise. Every morning he brought me coffee in bed, just the way I liked it. 1 sugar, a splash of cream, in a delicate porcelain cup that had belonged to his mother. He paid every bill, managed every account, filed every tax return. When financial paperwork arrived, I'd get a sticky note, "Sign here, love. I've handled everything else." And I always signed. He called me my Rose. In public, at parties, even in arguments. "Come on, Rose. You know I'm just trying to make life easier for you." The nickname made me feel special, chosen. I wasn't just a wife, I was his Rose, protected and cherished. I didn't question the financial side of our lives because Peter made it seem like there was nothing to question. I focused on my students, on our home, on being the kind of wife I thought a good man deserved. I planned birthday parties, holiday dinners, summer vacations. I was the one behind the scenes, but I never resented it because Peter made me feel like I was essential. I never once opened that drawer in the desk, not even when we moved houses, not even during spring cleaning. It was off limits, a rule, a boundary, and I respected it. I believed I didn't need to know what was inside. Peter had built a world where ignorance looked like luxury, and I had let myself believe it was love. But love should never come with a key you're forbidden to use. Not when that key holds the truth about the life you've lived. The click of the key sliding into the lock was quieter than I expected. Gentle, almost like a whisper. But in that soft sound, my life began to unravel. It was the spring of 2006, when the first fissure formed in what I believed was an unshakable foundation. Peter had gone to San Diego for a commercial development conference. I was grading midterms when I got a call from our accountant, Daniel Kim. We'd been working with Daniel for 3 years, professional, polite, always ahead of the tax season curve. "Valerie, I'm prepping your returns, but I'm missing the depreciation schedules for the properties you and Peter own. Could you check the home office for those?" I froze, red pen still in hand. "What properties?" I asked. Daniel paused. "The rental properties. There are 3 listed under both your names. Didn't Peter discuss this with you?" I stood in the middle of our living room, blinking at the desk like it had grown fangs. "No," I said slowly, heat creeping up my neck. "I wasn't aware we owned any rental properties." "You're listed as co-owner, Valerie," Daniel said, concern creeping into his voice. "You're legally responsible for the accuracy of these returns." I mumbled something about checking and hung up. I walked into our bedroom and stared at the mahogany desk. That drawer was the only place Peter ever kept anything business-related, but I couldn't open it. I wasn't allowed to. That night, I called Peter at his hotel. "Hey, Rose," he answered cheerfully. "Missing me already?" "Peter," I said quietly, "Daniel called. He said I'm listed on some rental properties. Why didn't you ever tell me?" The air shifted through the phone line. "What exactly did he tell you?" he asked, voice suddenly clipped. "Just that he needs the depreciation schedules and that I'm co-owner on these places. Why wouldn't I know that?" "Val," Peter sighed, using the shortened version of my name he only used when annoyed. It's just for tax purposes. You don't need to worry about all that. It's complicated, and I didn't want to stress you. But Daniel said, Daniel's an accountant, not a marriage counselor, he cut in. When I get back, we'll go over everything together. But I need you to promise me something, okay? What? I whispered. Don't open that drawer. There are contracts, legal items, things that could cause problems if misunderstood. I've always handled this so you wouldn't have to. Just trust me. Please, promise me you'll wait. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed that something wasn't right. But Peter's voice softened. Please, Rose, let me handle this, like I always have. And so I did what I had done for years. I promised. But something inside me shifted that night. I couldn't name it then, but it was the first time I looked at Peter and saw not just my husband, but a man capable of keeping secrets. When he returned home with a bottle of wine and a box of my favorite truffles, he spread out a few documents on the dining table. Numbers, charts, things I didn't understand. See, just boring rental property stuff. Helps pad our retirement. Nothing to worry about. I nodded and smiled, but the seed of doubt had already taken root. Over the next year, things changed subtly. Peter became more careful, more guarded. Bills stopped arriving in the mail. He had them redirected to his office. He took phone calls in hushed tones, stepping outside or closing the bedroom door. When I asked about it, he'd brush me off. Nothing that would interest you, Rose, just business headaches. At parties, he started describing me differently. Valerie is the heart of our home. I handled the numbers so she doesn't have to. Our friends would smile, nod, and say how lucky I was to have a husband who took care of everything. I started to wonder why I was the only one who found that strange. At the bank, tellers spoke only to Peter. At our insurance appointments, he'd answer for me even when I was sitting beside him. And slowly, without realizing, I stopped fighting it. I stopped asking about our finances. I let Peter carry the weight. I told myself it was love, that he was shielding me. But really, he was silencing me. My independence, the same trait he claimed to admire when we met, was being buried beneath layers of comfort and convenience. And I let it happen. When our daughter Kayla bought her first home, I handed her off to Peter when she started asking about mortgage rates. Your dad knows all about that, I said, forgetting that I once handled my own mortgage before Peter. That locked drawer became more than furniture. It became a monument to everything I had given up for the illusion of safety. The night of our 20th anniversary shattered everything. We had rented out the top floor of a charming bistro in town. 40 guests, champagne flowing, music drifting from a live quartet. I wore a forest green satin gown that made me feel youthful again. I had planned the entire event, right down to the flower arrangements and the memory slideshow. People clapped during Peter's speech. He raised his glass and said I was the greatest blessing of his life. And I believed it, until I heard his voice from the corridor behind the kitchen, sharp and amused. I had gone to fix my makeup when I caught him laughing with his friend Neil and our neighbor Charles. 20 years, Peter, Neil said. How do you keep a woman happy that long without her meddling in your business? It's easy, Peter replied, his voice lower, darker than I'd ever heard him. You manage expectations. Valerie is sweet, but she doesn't have the mind for financial stuff. She'd drown in the details. I give her just enough to feel comfortable and nothing more. She trusts me, never asks questions. It's perfect. What if something happens to you? Charles asked. I've got it covered. She's protected. She'll never need to understand the hard parts. I didn't move. I couldn't. My heels rooted to the tile, my mind racing. I wasn't his wife. I was a child he managed, a liability he softened, a delicate problem he kept contained. I walked back to the dining room, forced to smile, clinked champagne glasses. I let Peter kiss my cheek in front of our friends and call me his Rose. But something inside me had broken. From that night on, every gesture Peter made felt different. Every coffee in bed felt like a bribe. Every kiss on the forehead felt like a lid closing tighter on a box I had been placed in without my consent. The cage I had once mistaken for a castle was beginning to show its bars. I didn't know then that in less than a year, I'd be standing alone in that same bedroom holding a key to the truth. I didn't know that the love I had defended so fiercely would become the very thing I had to escape. But I had felt it in my bones that night. The truth was coming for me, and the only thing left was the courage to face it. The call came on an ordinary Tuesday in early February, just after lunch. I was alone in the teacher's lounge, grading poetry essays and nursing a lukewarm cup of tea, when my phone vibrated. The screen flashed private number, and something in me hesitated before I answered. Mrs. Montez? The voice was calm, professional. This is Dr. Alicia Gordon from San Rafael Medical Center. I'm calling about your husband, Peter. My blood went cold. She didn't pause. He was brought in by paramedics this afternoon. He suffered a massive heart attack while at work. I'm so sorry. We did everything we could, but... I didn't hear the rest. The phone dropped from my hand, and the next thing I remember, my colleague Martha was holding my shoulders, guiding me into a chair while I gasped for air like I'd been hit by a wave I never saw coming. The next few days blurred into casserole dishes, floral arrangements, and a steady stream of sympathies from people who kept calling Peter a good man and telling me I must feel so secure with the way he had planned everything. Planned. Yes, Peter had planned everything, including the part where I would have no idea what was actually happening behind the scenes of our life. After the funeral, I sat in our bedroom for hours each night, staring at the mahogany desk. The drawer remained locked, its silence louder than ever. Sympathy cards piled up on the dresser. Our checking account, the only one I had access to, showed just over $9,000. But the mortgage alone was nearly $13,000 a month. I called the bank for answers. Passwords, estate accounts, legal documentation I had never seen. "Ma'am, your name isn't listed on these," the banker explained gently. "You'll need to go through the estate attorney to determine what you're entitled to." Entitled to. In my own marriage, the word set like acid on my tongue. I called Kayla, but she was in the middle of a project deadline. "Mom, can you just gather everything? I'll help you when I visit in a few weeks." Dana offered to help, but she lived too far and had her own kids to care for. "Sell the house," she said. "Start fresh. Peter probably had a complicated system. You don't need all that stress." But how do you start fresh when every inch of your home whispers reminders of a life that wasn't real? I slept on one side of the bed, just like always. I drank tea from the delicate porcelain cups, the same ones Peter had brought to me with love each morning. But now, every sip tasted like betrayal. The desk sat at the foot of our bed, untouched, a gatekeeper to a truth I wasn't brave enough to face. Until one Thursday morning in late March, when something inside me cracked. I hadn't changed out of my pajamas. I sat on the floor surrounded by documents, bills I couldn't make sense of, accounts I'd never heard of, notices about properties and places I didn't recognize. I hadn't eaten in days. My weight had dropped. My clothes hung looser. The flowers Kayla sent were withered and dry, still in their lace on the nightstand. The fridge held expired milk and silence. The woman Peter used to call his Rose had wilted into someone I no longer recognized. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, I couldn't answer simple questions when people asked how I was doing. "Fine," I'd say with a smile, but behind the smile, I was unraveling. That night, Dana called and heard something in my voice. "Val, please," she said. "Hire a lawyer. Talk to a financial advisor. You can't keep sitting in that house drowning in confusion." "With what money?" I snapped before I could stop myself. "I don't even know what we have. I don't know who I am without Peter telling me And that was the truth I hadn't spoken out loud until that moment. I had lived as half of a person for so long that I didn't know how to function without instruction. I wasn't grieving a man anymore. I was grieving the version of myself he had erased. That night after Dana's call, I walked into the bedroom lit only by the soft glow of the moon. The desk sat there, daring me to confront it. I stood in front of it, fists clenched. I thought about smashing the drawer open with a hammer. I thought about throwing the whole thing out onto the curb. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not without something shifting inside me. And then it did. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning in late March, I decided to donate Peter's belongings. Not out of readiness, but out of desperation. I needed space. Not just in the bedroom, but in my life. I folded his shirts into boxes with trembling hands, his scent still lingering in the fabric. When I opened his jewelry box to pack away his watches, I noticed something odd. The bottom lining, burgundy felt, had a corner that lifted slightly. I peeled it back, and there it was. The key, taped down carefully, and a folded piece of Peter's personal stationery. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing. The note was brief, written in Peter's familiar, deliberate handwriting. For Valerie, when she's ready. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you while I was alive. You're stronger than I ever let you believe. P. My breath caught in my throat. Stronger than I ever let you believe. What did that even mean? What had he kept from me? What had he buried beneath 23 years of trust and ritual and silence? The brass key felt like it pulsed in my palm. I walked across the room, dropped to my knees in front of the desk, and stared at the drawer that had haunted me for months, for years, really. I'm sorry, Peter, but I can't live like this anymore. The key slid into the lock with a soft, traitorous click. And as the mechanism turned, I knew this wasn't just about finances. It was about discovering who I had been all along, beneath the illusion, beneath the control. It was about reclaiming the life I'd unknowingly handed over. I pulled the drawer open, bracing for everything. And nothing, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Inside the drawer were 3 thick manila folders, perfectly aligned like soldiers standing guard over decades of silence. Each was labeled in Peter's precise handwriting: investments, properties, and Valerie's file. My hand hovered over the folders for a long moment, as if touching them might change everything about the last 23 years. And in truth, it already had. I reached for the one marked investments and opened it on the floor beside me. The first page was a brokerage account statement showing a balance of over $400,000. My breath caught. I flipped to the next, a Roth IRA with 6 figures. Then another account. Then a money market account with balances I'd never seen, names I didn't recognize, institutions I'd never heard Peter mention. I stared, shaking. The joint checking account I thought was our nest egg had only $9,000 in it. But this? This was a financial empire built in secret. I moved to the second folder, properties. Inside were deeds to 4 properties. Not 3, not the mysterious few mentioned by Daniel the accountant all those years ago. 4, all fully paid off. There were rental agreements, profit and loss sheets, maintenance logs, a vacation condo in Carmel I never knew existed, 2 duplexes in Santa Fe, and a downtown office space Peter had been leasing out for years. Income streams, some earning more per month than my full-time teaching salary. It was all organized, all professional, and all hidden. But it was the third folder, Valerie's file, that undid me. Inside were nearly 24 letters, all addressed to Mr. Thomas Brantley, Peter's longtime financial advisor. Every single one treated me like a fragile object in a glass case. A letter dated 2009 read, Valerie continues to thrive when left out of the financial discussions. Please send detailed account summaries to my office only. This simplified statements for our joint account are sufficient for her peace of mind. My hands trembled as I flipped through them, watching the years of erasure unfold in black ink. A note from 2014. Valerie asked again about the condo in Santa Fe. I've told her it's under an investment shell company. No need to involve her further. She doesn't respond well to complexity. I stopped breathing. These weren't business decisions. They were strategies to keep me small, to keep me trusting, to keep me in the dark. But the worst came in a letter dated 6 months before Peter died. It was longer, more introspective. If something were to happen to me, I worry Valerie wouldn't know how to manage everything. But it's too late to change that now. I've built this system around her. Disrupting it would only cause her anxiety. I've put things in place to ensure she'll be taken care of. That's what matters. Taken care of? As if I were a dependent child. As if I didn't deserve to be a full participant in my own life. At the bottom of the folder was a sealed envelope with my name written on the front in Peter's curling script. For a long time, I couldn't open it. I just stared, chest tight, hands sweating. But finally, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. My dearest Valerie, it began. If you're reading this, then you found the key, and you're ready. I don't know what words can make up for what I've kept from you, but I need you to understand something. I was never trying to hurt you. I was trying to protect you from a world I didn't think you wanted to be part of. But the truth is, I was protecting myself more than you. I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew how much we really had, you might not need me the way I needed you to. I'm sorry for keeping you in the dark. You are always more capable than I gave you credit for. The enclosed key opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Everything you need to move forward is there. You don't need anyone to take care of yourself, Valerie. You never did. I just wish I had realized it sooner. I read the letter again and again until the words no longer blurred through my tears. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry yet. I was awakening. The next morning, I walked into First National Bank with that key clutched in my palm. My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady as I spoke to the manager. I'm here to access my husband's safety deposit box. She led me into a cold, windowless room and placed the metal box on the table in front of me. Take all the time you need, she said gently, then left me alone. I opened the box, and inside was another folder labeled Valerie's Financial Primer. There were notes in Peter's handwriting, simplifying every account, explaining the purpose of each investment, breaking down strategies he had used for over 20 years. There were insurance policies, stock portfolios, real estate documents, and, at the very bottom, a typed financial overview with a net worth listed at $1.2 million. I sat there for hours reading every single page, learning my life one sheet at a time. For the first time, I understood what I owned, what I could do, what power had always been mine but withheld from me. But I didn't tell anyone. Not Kayla, not Dana, not even Thomas, the advisor. Not yet. I needed time. I needed to take it all in. I left the bank that day with a folder full of truths and a mind that had never been sharper. That night, I sat at the mahogany desk, every drawer open, and made my first real financial decision. I opened a personal checking account. I redirected the rental income, and I scheduled an appointment with Thomas Brantley without asking for permission. "Mrs. Montez," said Thomas, when I arrived, "I admit I was surprised to get your call. Peter always—" Peter's gone, and I'm the one in charge now. I placed the documents on his desk. Walk me through everything. For 2 hours, he did. And for 2 hours, I asked questions. Intelligent ones, hard ones, and I understood the answers. Every single one. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Valerie, forgive me for saying this, but Peter underestimated you." I smiled, not because it was a compliment, but because it was the truth. And the truth was something I'd finally reclaimed. As I left the office that day, the sun hit my face in a way that felt different. Like I was walking not just into a new chapter, but into a self I had forgotten existed. The drawer had opened, and so had I. In the days that followed my meeting with Thomas, I didn't slow down. I couldn't. Something had ignited in me. A determination I hadn't felt since my 20s, when I once dreamed of writing a book, starting a nonprofit, maybe going back to school. Before I traded those dreams for safety, before Peter wrapped my life in velvet and called it love. I spent every evening at the desk, poring over documents, watching real estate investment tutorials online, reading every book I could check out on financial independence. I wasn't just learning, I was remembering. Remembering that I used to be sharp, curious, full of ideas. I had buried that woman beneath years of sweetness and gratitude, convinced that needing less was noble, that ignorance was trust. One night, while reviewing property reports, I called the management company Peter had used. "I need all lease agreements forwarded to my email," I told the agent. "Also, send me the last 2 years of profit and loss statements." There was a pause. "Are you Mrs. Montez?" "Yes," I said, calm and direct, "and I'm now managing these properties myself." I expected resistance. Instead, the woman on the other end of the line said, "Absolutely, Mrs. Montez. I'll send them right away." With every document I read, with every decision I made, I was reclaiming not just financial control, but my voice. It had been years since I had spoken with conviction about anything outside of literature and lesson plans. And now I was making calls, taking meetings, adjusting investment portfolios. I started small. I adjusted our insurance deductibles and redirected our rental income to my new account. I fired Peter's old lawyer and hired a woman recommended by Dana, someone who didn't look at me like I was about to cry or ask for help. When the bills arrived, I opened them before I had my coffee. I even had the locks changed on the house, not out of fear, but as a symbolic gesture. That chapter was over. I no longer lived in a house where drawers were locked and truths were hidden. 1 week into this transformation, I got a call from Neil, Peter's old business partner. "Valerie," he said, his voice syrupy, the way men speak to women they think are weak. "I heard about Peter. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine how hard it must be. I thought I could come by, help you sort through the estate. There are a few deals Peter and I had in place that need your signature. Complicated stuff, but I'll walk you through it." I smiled into the phone. "That's thoughtful, Neil. But I've already reviewed the contracts and spoken to our advisor. I understand everything I need to. If there's something urgent, email me the documents." Silence. Then a small chuckle. "Valerie, I'm not sure this is something you can really—" "Neil," I said, voice sharp, "I've been managing this estate alone for over a month. I know what's in the accounts, I know what's tied up in properties, and I know when someone is trying to get access to something they have no legal claim to. You can email the paperwork or we're done." He didn't call again. That same week, I walked into our insurance office and told Tom Morrison, the man who had dealt with Peter exclusively for 15 years, that I wanted to update all our policies. I'd like to increase coverage on the rentals. I placed a spreadsheet on his desk. Also, I'm adding a term life policy under my own name. These are the deductibles and premiums I'm willing to accept. He blinked at me. "Mrs. Montez, these are fairly significant changes. Are you sure you want to handle this without consulting anyone? Perhaps one of Peter's associates could—" "Tom," I interrupted, "I am the policyholder now. I've read the contracts, run the numbers, and made my decisions. Can you help me make the changes, or should I find another agent?" He swallowed hard. "I can help you." That evening, Dana called to check in. "You sound different," she said after 5 minutes. "I can't explain it, Val. You sound like you again. Like the woman I knew before you got married." "I feel like her," I said softly as I stared out the window as dusk settled over our quiet street. "But I also feel like someone new. Someone who doesn't need permission to speak or act." You're scaring me a little, she laughed. In a good way. I scared myself at first. But now I feel awake. Kayla called the following Sunday. Hey, Mom, how are you doing with all the estate stuff? Do you need me to come home for a few days and help sort things out? Her tone was gentle, but laced with something I'd come to recognize. Pity. I'm doing just fine, I said. Actually, I've made quite a bit of progress. Really? She sounded skeptical. Like, what kind of progress? I've met with our financial advisor, opened a new account, I'm redirecting the rental income, learning about real estate trends, and, starting to consider buying another property in Flagstaff. What? She laughed nervously. Mom, are you sure you're not moving too fast? Maybe you should let someone help with all this. There's a lot to manage. I closed the book I was reading, The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, and smiled. Sweetheart, I've been managing a classroom of 30 hormonal teenagers for 20 years. I think I can handle a few investment properties. She didn't know what to say. And I didn't try to explain myself. I was done justifying myself to people who only knew the version of me Peter had allowed to exist. By the second month, I was different. Not just on paper, but in posture, in presence, in how I moved through the world. At the grocery store, the cashier greeted me with new warmth. At the bank, the teller handed me documents without glancing around for a man. I bought a new set of coffee mugs, sturdy, modern, dishwasher safe. I donated the delicate porcelain set to a local women's shelter. A small gesture, but symbolic. Peter's rituals no longer defined my mornings. I define them now. Dana visited that weekend and watched me carefully as I flipped through tenant applications. You've really become a different person, she said. I've become the person I was supposed to be, I corrected. Peter didn't protect me. He diminished me. For 23 years, I let him. Dana looked like she might cry. But you're not angry? I thought about that for a long moment. I am, but not in the way I thought I would be. I'm not angry at him anymore. I'm angry at how easily I gave away my power. But I'm also grateful I lived long enough to take it back. And just when I thought I had uncovered every secret Peter left behind, one final letter surfaced, and it changed everything. Again. The letter arrived, tucked inside an envelope from our old lawyer's office. I almost didn't notice it. It was sandwiched between a property tax reminder and a newsletter from the community center. But the envelope had Peter's handwriting on the front, and it was addressed to me directly. My hands stilled. I hadn't seen his handwriting in weeks, and now here it was, looping, elegant, somehow both familiar and jarring. I opened it carefully and slid out a cream-colored page, slightly yellowed with age. The letter wasn't dated, but I could tell from the way it was written that it wasn't recent. Valerie, it began, there are things I never said aloud, not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't want to lose control of the version of us I'd built. You trusted me more than I deserved, and I took advantage of that trust by creating a world that only worked as long as you stayed small. I never wanted to lie. I just thought if I kept the burdens on my side, you'd always need me. I wanted to be irreplaceable. That's not love, I realize now. That's fear. If you're reading this, then you found the other pieces. You've seen what I hid. I'm sorry for every page I kept from you, for every decision I made without you, and for every time I looked at you and saw someone delicate when you were so clearly strong. There is one more truth, one that might explain everything and break everything, but I couldn't take it with me. You deserve it. The key I left you opens a lockbox in the storage unit, Unit C14, Red Pine Storage. Inside, you'll find a ledger and a letter. I hope you can forgive me, not just for the money, for the story I never told you. I read it again and again. And when I looked up, the world seemed to blur. My breathing turned shallow, but I didn't cry. I had run out of tears. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and drove straight to Red Pine Storage. I hadn't been there in over a year. Peter had always handled that space. I only vaguely remembered its purpose. Christmas decorations, maybe? old furniture. But as I opened Unit C14, the metal door groaned like it had something to confess. Inside was a single filing cabinet, a few sealed boxes, and a heavy-looking metal chest with a brass padlock. I used the key. It clicked open. And there it was, a red leather-bound ledger, carefully preserved, and another envelope addressed to me. I opened the letter first. Valerie, it said. I never told you about Rose. She was my mother's sister. She lived with us for a while when I was young. She struggled with mental illness, and my father used her as a cautionary tale. I was told that women like her were delicate, unstable, and better off sheltered from the world. That idea followed me into adulthood, into marriage. And when I saw your brilliance, I also saw danger. I thought if I didn't guide you, you might unravel. But the truth is, I was afraid you'd outgrow me. I hid our finances because I couldn't bear the thought of not being necessary. This ledger belongs to you now. It's not just money, it's a map of everything I failed to share. Please make something better with it than I did. The ledger detailed 23 years of transactions. Every real estate deal, every rental income, every investment. But at the very back, in a sealed pocket, I found a small envelope marked Jackson. Jackson was a name I hadn't heard in decades. Peter's college roommate. I opened the envelope and pulled out a photo, Peter standing next to a boy with dark curls and a wide smile. On the back, in faded ink, it read, Peter and Jackson, 1981, the summer everything changed. I stared at it for a long time, then opened the last folded sheet. It was a letter to Jackson. You were my first and only real love, it began. But I chose a life that made more sense. I married Valerie because I thought it was what I was supposed to do. And she gave me a good life. A steady one. But I never stopped wondering what might have happened if I had been brave enough to choose you. I froze. The world tilted. For a moment, I thought I might fall over. But I didn't. I stood in that cold storage unit gripping that letter, realizing that the marriage I thought I knew, the man I thought I knew, was even more complex than I ever imagined. My husband had lived a double life, not in action perhaps, but certainly in heart. He was his choice for safety, for image, for comfort. But he was never the fire, and I never knew. I sat down on the floor of the unit and stared at the metal chest. I didn't feel betrayal in the way one might expect. I felt grief for the years I had spent loving a man who had hidden not just money, but longing, for the conversations we never had, for the secrets that shaped our lives from the shadows. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our marriage. His absences, his quiet moods, the way he always looked out the window before bed. I assumed they were signs of stress, of work, but maybe they were signs of regret. The next morning, I made myself coffee in the new mugs. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote my own letter. Peter, I began, thank you for the truth, even if it was late. I can't say I understand everything, but I do understand now that I spent 23 years as half a person. Not because I wasn't whole, but because I believed I needed to be less for you to love me. I forgive you, but I'm not forgetting. I will take every dollar you left me, every property you built, and I will turn it into something that lives in the light. Not in a drawer, not in a shadow. You are no longer the gatekeeper of my life. I am. I signed the letter, folded it, and placed it inside the desk drawer, unlocked. That weekend, I made an appointment to see a therapist. I wanted to understand how I ignored the signs, how I traded agency for affection. In therapy, I cried for the first time in weeks, and then I laughed. I told the story of Peter's letter to Jackson, and the therapist gently said, Valerie, sometimes people build lives that are easier to live than they are to explain. It doesn't mean you weren't loved. It just means you weren't loved completely. I let that sentence wash over me. I wasn't loved completely. But now, I would learn how to love myself completely. I started by enrolling in a community business course. I was the oldest student in the room and the most confident. I pitched an idea for a nonprofit to help widowed women learn financial literacy. I called it the Open Drawer Project. Every woman who walked through the door would learn to read bank statements, challenge investment advisors, and build a future that no one could keep from them. The first donation came from Peter's Properties. The ribbon cutting was quiet, but powerful. And as I stepped into that new chapter, one final message from the past was waiting for me. One I never expected, and it came from someone I never imagined would reach out. The email arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. I had just returned from a small networking breakfast with local businesswomen and was sipping my coffee when the notification chimed. The subject line read, "From Jackson." For a moment, I just stared at it. The name didn't feel real. It felt like something from a dream I wasn't supposed to remember. My heart pounded in my chest as I clicked it open. The message was brief, but every word carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. Dear Valerie, I hope this message finds you in peace. My name is Jackson. I knew Peter very well, more than most. I only recently learned of his passing, and I wanted to reach out not to cause confusion or reopen wounds, but because I feel that after all these years, you deserve honesty. Peter and I were very close in college. What began as a friendship quickly became more, though the world we lived in at the time did not make space for us to explore that openly. When he chose to marry, I respected that decision. I let him go, but I never stopped caring. We stayed in touch sporadically. Letters, a few calls, nothing consistent. I never intended to disrupt your life. I never wanted to be a secret that hurt you. But I believe Peter loved you, in the only way he knew how. I believe he wanted you to have the truth. Finally, if you ever want to talk or if there's anything you'd like to ask, I'm here. Respectfully, Jackson. I sat in silence for a long time. Then I replied, Jackson, thank you for your message. I appreciate your honesty. I have so many questions, I don't even know how to begin. But I want you to know, I don't hate Peter. I just wish I had known more. I wish he had trusted me enough to share his full self. I don't know if I'm ready to talk yet, but I may be soon. Valerie. I didn't send the message right away. I saved it to drafts and walked outside. The sun was warm, the breeze light, and for the first time in a long time, I looked up at the sky without feeling like I owed it anything. That evening, I reread the letter Peter had left, the one that led me to the storage unit. I ran my fingers over his handwriting. I realized that part of me still loved him, not as a man, but as a mirror of my past. He had shaped so much of my identity, but he would not define the rest of it. I hit send. Over the next few weeks, Jackson and I exchanged a few emails. Each one opened a window into the man Peter had been before I knew him. Stories about their long walks on campus, nights spent talking about dreams they never pursued, how Peter had once said he admired my strength from afar even before he approached me. It was strange, comforting, painful, illuminating. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't even angry. I felt included. For the first time, I understood the depth of the man I had married, and I understood the depth of what he had withheld. Meanwhile, the Open Drawer Project began to gain traction. Women of all ages started showing up, some in their 20s, some in their 70s. They carried shoe boxes of paperwork, unopened mail, old checkbooks with someone else's handwriting. They came in frightened, ashamed, uncertain, but they left empowered. I watched them sit taller week by week, watched their questions grow bolder. I saw them become versions of themselves they'd forgotten existed. One woman, June, was 74. Her husband had recently passed, and she hadn't paid a bill in 40 years. I thought I was stupid, she told me. I thought if I asked too many questions, he'd think I didn't trust him. So I just stayed quiet. I placed a hand over hers and said, "You're not stupid. You were taught silence was safety. But you don't live in his world anymore. You live in yours." She cried. Then she opened her first credit report. On the 6-month anniversary of Peter's death, I held a private ceremony. Not a funeral. He already had one. This was a ritual for myself. I gathered every letter, every document, and every relic of the life we had shared. I placed them in a wooden box and buried them in the backyard beneath a new cherry blossom tree. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I needed to mark the moment. To say goodbye not just to Peter, but to the woman I was when I loved him. That evening, I made myself dinner. Just for me. I opened a bottle of wine and toasted the quiet. I didn't feel lonely. I felt whole. And then, just before bed, I checked my email one more time. A new message from Jackson. "Valerie, I've thought a lot about our letters, about Peter, about you. I'm flying to your city in a few weeks for work. If you're open to it, I'd love to meet for coffee. No pressure. Just two people who shared history with the same man. Let me know." I stared at the screen. My first instinct was hesitation. What would it even mean to meet the man Peter once loved? But then I thought of how far I'd come, of the woman I was becoming, and I typed back, "Jackson, I would like that. Let's meet." I hit send. Then I closed my laptop, turned off the light, and lay down in bed, no longer haunted by what I didn't know, but at peace with everything I had learned. Peter was gone. His secrets had surfaced. His legacy had shifted. And I, for the first time in decades, felt truly alive. But meeting Jackson, that was still to come. And I didn't yet know what doors it might open, or what part of myself I might rediscover when I looked into the eyes of someone who once held the other half of my husband's heart. We met on a rainy afternoon at a small cafe tucked between an art gallery and a bookstore, the kind of place Peter would have loved. I arrived early, half expecting to change my mind at the last moment, but I didn't. I sat by the window with a mug of tea between my hands, watching the raindrops stream down the glass, each one carving its own path, like every secret Peter had left behind. Jackson arrived right on time. He was older than I expected. Silver at his temples, a thoughtful quiet in the way he carried himself. But his eyes were kind. We recognized each other instantly, not from any photo, but from the shared ache we both carried. "Valerie?" he asked gently. I nodded and stood. We shook hands like old friends who had never met. There was no awkwardness, just silence wrapped in respect. He ordered a coffee and we sat, talking slowly at first. He asked how I was really doing. I told him the truth. I was tired, rebuilding, but not broken. He told me about his life. He had never married, had lived alone for many years, always pouring himself into his work, never quite finding someone he could be fully open with after Peter. It was strange and tender, hearing him speak about my husband with such love and honesty. "He loved you, Valerie," he said quietly. I never doubted that. He just didn't know how to love without hiding. I swallowed hard, not because I disagreed, but because it finally made sense. "I think he was afraid," I said. "Afraid of who he might become if he let go of the image he'd built." "Aren't we all?" Jackson replied. We sat in silence for a moment. Two people tied together by someone who had never fully belonged to either of us. I didn't feel bitterness. I felt peace. We stayed for hours. The rain stopped, the sky cleared, and still we sat, sharing stories, filling in blanks in each other's memories. I told him about the storage unit, the ledger, the cherry blossom tree. He told me about the summer of 1981, the moments when Peter was bold and full of laughter, when they dreamed of living in a city where no one would care who they loved. But we weren't that brave, and the world wasn't that ready. As we said goodbye, he hugged me, gently, warmly. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "Peter may have lived behind walls, but today, you helped me tear some of mine down." I smiled, because I knew exactly what that felt like. One evening, I walked into the backyard with a glass of wine. The cherry blossom tree had started to bloom, tiny pink petals reaching toward the sky. I stood beneath it, breathing in the cool spring air. I didn't say anything aloud. I didn't need to. The silence held everything: grief, forgiveness, clarity, freedom. I was no longer trapped by secrets or defined by what I hadn't known. I was living forward. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, sealed with wax. It was from Jackson. Inside was a small photograph of Peter, laughing, wind in his hair, joy all over his face. On the back, Jackson had written, "He was most himself when he didn't have to choose. Thank you for helping me remember that." I framed the photo and placed it on a shelf, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder that life is not about the stories we're given, but the ones we choose to write next. My next story was still unfolding. I didn't know what chapter would come next, but I knew one thing for certain. No one would ever keep me in the dark again. And if someone handed me a locked drawer, I'd find the key myself. I am Valerie, and I am no longer afraid of the truth. If you've ever been left behind in the shadows, if you've ever wondered whether you were enough, let me say this: your story matters. You deserve to know, to ask, to be told. And when the truth comes, no matter how late, you have the right to turn it into power. Subscribe for more true stories of healing, justice, and the strength to reclaim your voice.